The world of Breath of the Wild is the most massive world we've seen in the Zelda series, and hopefully in the sequel to Breath of the Wild, we'll see the return of dungeons. Dungeons in Breath of the Wild were one of the biggest disappointments in the Divine Beast, but I thought that they had their place for that time, but I'll talk about that in a later video. But what I wanted to talk about today was the possibility of dungeons in Breath of the Wild sequel. But before we do that, if you guys could like the video and subscribe, that would be appreciated. So let's get into it. Traditional dungeons in Breath of the Wild 2, it's something we all want to see. I remember way back when Breath of the Wild 2's reveal trailer came out, a lot of people speculated based off this one specific part in the trailer that we may see the return of traditional dungeons in Breath of the Wild 2. In this still, you can see Zonai Ruins entering into some sort of cave, and this is where people think could be the entrance to some sort of dungeon. One thing that's pretty cool is if this is a dungeon, it does seem to take inspiration from the original dungeons in Zelda 1, since we can see it has the animal theme just like the dungeons in Zelda 1, which is really cool because one of the things that developers wanted to do with Breath of the Wild was they wanted to go back to Zelda's roots, and they took a lot of inspiration from Zelda 1. In its open-endedness, enemies and locations in places like Spectacle Rock and the Dueling Peaks. It's cool because it more solidifies the connection between these newer games and Zelda 1, but the Zonai were one of the biggest, most unexplained things in Breath of the Wild, and I've got a feeling that most of these dungeons will probably have at least some Zonai influence. I don't know if all of these dungeons will be animal themed, but one thing we do know about the Zonai is that they worship the boar, owl, and the serpent, which may or may not be the animal represented on the face of this dungeon. The subterranean world we know is going to play a huge role in Breath of the Wild 2, and I think that the dungeons we see in this game will probably be beneath the surface of Hyrule, including underwater. I know there's a lot of possible locations for dungeons in Breath of the Wild 2, but these ones I feel like are the most likely. In my opinion, Hyrule Castle was the best dungeon in Breath of the Wild, and was the most similar to previous Zelda games. It was pretty massive compared to the Divine Beast, and had a lot of mini-bosses, treasure, and even some of the most powerful weapons in the game. Every time I go back and replay Hyrule Castle, there's always something new to be found there, and in the lower levels of Hyrule Castle, there are caves and mines, and in the sequel to Breath of the Wild's reveal trailer, you can see that even deeper below Hyrule Castle, there are massive caverns with ancient structures. I believe that down below Hyrule Castle is not only one of the more likely dungeon locations, but based on what we've seen in Breath of the Wild 2's reveal trailer, I believe that it will probably be the first dungeon in the game. Akkala Citadel is one of my favorite areas in Breath of the Wild, and I think that it's only natural that it's holding more secrets. Before Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity came out, we got a trailer, and we saw that Akkala Citadel was going to be a playable stage. Even though we got to see some of the inside of Akkala Citadel in Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity, I feel like still deeper below Akkala Citadel, we may get some sort of dungeon, since we didn't get to see the full extent of the fortress. Located in the Gerudo Desert, the Arbiter's Grounds is most well known for being the place of Ganondorf's failed execution in Twilight Princess. From the surface, it doesn't look like much, but I'm sure if all the sand is removed, a much larger structure will probably be revealed. Now, I'm not sure how all the sand will be removed, but I'm sure if even a little bit is removed, perhaps the entrance to a long-forgotten dungeon underneath the sand could be revealed, similar to how part of the dungeon in Twilight Princess was located underground. Normally, Lake Hylia is one of the main locations featured in Zelda games when it's present, but in Breath of the Wild, it didn't play much of a big role aside from housing a few Koroks and a shrine. Breath of the Wild didn't feature swimming, but hopefully in its sequel, we'll see it open up the lakes and seas for exploration. Hopefully deep below the waters of Lake Hylia, the water temple is hiding, and with the inclusion of diving, they'll have an excuse that the dungeon was always there. My biggest hope is that Lake Hylia becomes much more prominent in Breath of the Wild sequel, and that it features a much larger roster of enemies. The 8th heroine is one of the biggest unknown mysteries in Breath of the Wild, and I think that in the sequel to Breath of the Wild, we may learn about what that secret is. The 7 heroines are 7 massive stone statues located in the Gerudo Desert that appear to depict the 7 sages of the Gerudo, but far north in the Gerudo Highlands, an 8th statue can be found removed from the rest. The mystery of why this figure was removed is unknown to us, but I think that the 8th heroine may be one of the locations of a dungeon, and hopefully in that process, we can learn about whoever this 8th heroine is and why their sword is located so far from the statue. The Forgotten Temple is another one of the biggest mysteries in Breath of the Wild. It's another massive structure that we know was once very significant to the Sheikah because of the massive amount of guardians found in the temple. Not only that, but it's also home to the largest goddess statue in the entire game. One thing that's interesting about the Forgotten Temple is that there's multiple piles of rubble with the gust of wind coming out from beneath, meaning that underneath the temple there could be a large opening. This place is so unknown and mysterious. Personally, I think that there's so much more to be uncovered and revealed about this temple, and I think that somewhere inside will hide some sort of dungeon. But like I said before, Breath of the Wild's map is so large and there are so many possible locations that could house dungeons in this game that it's insane. But I want to know what you guys think. In the comment section below, I want you guys to leave a list of all the places and areas that you think will have dungeons. I'm so interested to see what you guys think. Also tell me if you think I'm right or wrong. I think that these places have a strong chance of being dungeons. E3 is right around the corner, so like, subscribe, and I'm out. Peace.